You just got hit with IRS penalties. Maybe it's $5,000, maybe it's $50,000, maybe it's even more. And you're wondering, do I really have to pay this? Is there any way to get these penalties removed? I'm Andrew Bosserman, founder of Boss Tax Law. I'm a tax attorney, a CPA, and also a former IRS agent. And I'm going to talk to you in this video about something many taxpayers don't know exists. It's a penalty abatement request that the IRS approves essentially 100% of the time if you qualify. It's called First Time Penalty Abatement, and it's one of the IRS's best kept secrets. The IRS doesn't advertise it. They don't really tell you about it, but it's sitting right there in their internal manual. And you can use it to wipe out tens of thousands of dollars in penalties with a simple phone call or a letter if you prefer to have it in writing. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly who qualifies, how to request it, and the critical mistakes that cause most requests to fail. First Time Abatement, the IRS abbreviates its FTA, is an administrative waiver that removes penalties for taxpayers who have a clean compliance history. You don't need to prove hardship. You don't need to explain what went wrong and why you filed or paid late. You just need to meet 3 simple requirements and the IRS will remove the penalties. So 3 requirements are, number 1, you must have a clean compliance history for the 3 years prior to the tax year with penalties. Clean means no penalties for failing to file on time, failing to pay on time, or failing to deposit monies during that 3-year period. Number 2, you must be current on all filing requirements. You can't have any unfiled tax returns sitting out there. And number 3, you must have paid all current taxes due or you've set up a payment arrangement with the IRS. So that's it. If you meet those 3 requirements, the IRS is supposed to grant your request for first-time abatement. And first-time abatement will work for 3 main penalties: failure to file penalties, failure to pay penalties, and failure to deposit penalties. So failure to file and pay, those are for not filing or paying on time, and those can add up to a maximum of 25% of the tax each. Failure to deposit is a payroll penalty for not depositing payroll taxes on time if you're a business that has payroll. But first-time abatement doesn't work for all penalties. So accuracy-related penalties, fraud penalties, trust fund recovery penalties, those won't work. International information return penalties, such as filings forms 5471 and 5472. Although the IRS says those often don't qualify, I actually have a story about that I'll share in a few minutes where I was able to get those waived with first-time abatement. So now let me walk through how to determine if you qualify. If you're requesting abatement for penalties on, say, your 2023 tax return, you have to do a 3-year look back. The IRS looks at your 2020, 2021, and 2022 tax returns. During those 3 years, you can't have had failure to file, failure to pay, or failure to deposit penalties assessed. But some common misconceptions are, but I owed taxes before. That's fine. Owing taxes doesn't disqualify you from first-time abatement. Having a payment plan won't disqualify you. If the IRS is only looking at whether you got hit and were assessed penalties during that look-back period. And you can check your compliance history to see if penalties were assessed by requesting your transcript from the IRS and looking to see if those penalties were assessed. The other requirement we talked about is being in current compliance. You also need to be current on filing. This means filing all required tax returns. You're not sitting on any unfiled returns. It's okay if a return is on extension as it hasn't been filed yet, but if you're past the deadline and don't have an extension, you will need to get that tax return filed. Also, owing tax debt won't disqualify you. You just must be on a payment plan to pay off any taxes that are owed. So how do we request first-time abatement? The fastest and easiest way is by phone. You can literally call the IRS and have the penalties removed while you're on the phone. So the easiest way to do this is to call the number on your penalty notice, or you can call the main IRS number, which is 1-800-829-1040. When you get through to a representative, you just say something like, I'm calling to request first-time penalty abatement for the penalties on my whatever year, 2023 tax return. That's really all you have to say. The IRS representative will pull up your account, verify your compliance history, and if you qualify, they'll process the abatement right there on the call, and you'll receive a confirmation letter in the mail a few weeks later. And generally, I like calling to request first-time abatement. You generally get immediate resolution. You're not going to wait weeks or months to a response for your letter, and you can ask questions in real time, or if they say you don't qualify, you can ask why. So let me give you a real example of how powerful this phone method can be. So one Friday afternoon, a local CPA called me with an urgent question. Her client, a growing biotech company with foreign subsidiaries, was facing a penalty of nearly $100,000. The company had been late filing their first tax return, along with international reporting forms, and these are forms like 5471 and 5472. Their previous CPA had written into the IRS requesting reasonable cause abatement, but the IRS just denied it flat out. The CPA was now looking at filing a formal protest and taking the case to IRS appeals, but that process could drag on for months. What I did, I reviewed the client's tax transcripts and immediately identified a solution that had been overlooked. All the penalties could be abated by using the first-time abatement program. But here's the critical detail. The IRS won't abate these international penalties if there are unreversed penalties on the income tax return itself. So first, the smaller penalties on the income tax return needed to be abated under first-time abatement. Only then could the large international information return penalties be addressed. So I called the IRS directly and successfully had all the penalties waived over the phone. I had to call multiple lines and do it in the correct order, but there was no lengthy appeals process, no additional filings, one phone call, and nearly $100,000 in penalties disappeared immediately. So the biotech company and the CPA were both amazed and relieved. What seemed like a very large, insurmountable program was resolved in a matter of an hour or two on the phone with the IRS. Now, some of you might prefer to have your request in writing, and that's completely fine. You can request first-time abatement in writing. I generally recommend filing Form 843, and this is a form. It's titled Claim for Refund or Request for Abatement. You can fill it out, sign it, and request first-time abatement that way. And in the explanation section, you can simply keep it simple. You can just put something like requesting first-time abatement pursuant to IRM 20.1.1.3.3.2.1. And that is the section of the Internal Revenue Manual, the IRS's internal policy manual that governs this first-time abatement program. But you don't have to include explanations like why you filed or paid late. You don't have to apologize or make excuses or provide a long story about the hardship you went through. You just have to keep it short and factual and make sure you meet those 3 requirements for first-time abatement. If you do go the mailing route, you must make sure to sign and date it and also send the request via certified mail with return receipt. Generally, I'd say it takes 1 to 3 months for the IRS to process these forms. It can take longer sometimes. So that's why I generally recommend trying over the phone first, because you get an immediate answer. But there are some instances where the IRS will claim they can't process first-time abatement over the phone, sometimes if the penalty is too large or some other issue. So then you may have to make the request in writing. Now I'm going to talk about 3 mistakes that cause most time first-time abatement requests to fail. The number one is not checking your transcript first. So before you call or send a letter requesting first-time abatement, get your IRS transcripts and verify that you have clean compliance history. Sometimes people request FTA without checking, only to be denied because there was a penalty from 2 years ago they forgot about. Mistake number 2 is requesting first-time abatement while you're still non-compliant. Like I mentioned before, the IRS will not grant first-time abatement if you have unfiled return or unpaid current taxes, even if you have no penalties during the 3 years prior. You need to make sure, before you request first-time abatement, make sure all required returns are filed, you've paid your current taxes or set up a payment plan. So you have to essentially get your house in order, then request abatement. And mistake number 3 is just making it too complicated. This is oftentimes the biggest mistakes when taxpayers talk to the IRS or send in writing. They write a 3-page letter explaining their entire life story, requesting abatement. Don't do that. It's simple. It's straightforward. Either you qualify or you don't. You simply just have to state that you're requesting first-time abatement, and really, that's it. You're not requesting abatement under other options like reasonable cause, which looks more at your facts and circumstances. To qualify for first-time abatement, all the IRS has to do is look at your filing, payment, and penalty history in their system to determine if you qualify. So when calling or writing, keep it simple, keep it focused, and just request first-time abatement. So when you call over the phone, the IRS representative should be able to tell you right away whether your request is approved, and then you'll get a confirmation letter in a few weeks. If you wrote, the IRS generally takes, say, 1 to 3 months to process written requests, and you'll receive a letter back with their decision. If you're approved for first-time abatement, your tax account with the IRS will be adjusted. The penalties will be waived, and you won't have to pay them if you haven't paid them yet. But if you have paid the penalties, then you will get a refund. If you're denied, you'll get a denial letter explaining why. The denial letter will give you appeal rights, and you can appeal if you think the IRS's judgment was wrong. Also, an important note, first-time abatement isn't truly first time ever. It's just the first time within that 3-year period. So you can actually use first-time abatement multiple times. So if you use, say, first-time abatement to remove penalties for tax year 2023, you can't use it again until you have another clean 3-year compliance period. So you'd need to be clean for 24, 25, 26, and then in 2027, you could request it again, potentially, if you had penalties in that year. Another common question I get is, what if you have multiple years with penalties? So say you had penalties for tax years 22, 23, and 24. You can only use first-time abatement for one of those years. So generally, it would have to be 2022. For the other years, you'd have to request abatement based on reasonable cause, which is a different process and focuses more on facts and circumstances and how you tried your best to comply and file and pay on time, but for some extenuating circumstances, you couldn't do so. Another common question I get is, what about interest? So the IRS will abate penalties, but they rarely abate interest. The only scenarios where the IRS will generally abate or waive interest is when some mistake on the IRS's part or undue delay caused interest to accrue over time. So generally, even if you get penalties removed, you're still going to be on the hook for interest. So in conclusion, I'm wrapping this all up. First-time abatement is one of the easiest ways to save thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in IRS penalties if you qualify and if you request it correctly. The 3 requirements: a clean 3-year compliance history, current on filing, and paid or arranged to pay current taxes. If you meet those requirements, you have essentially a 100% chance of getting your penalties removed, often with a phone call. Like I said, if you qualify, the IRS will grant the abatement over the phone. That's why I recommend try calling first. It's faster and you get an immediate answer. If you can't get through or prefer to send something in writing, file Form 843. And also remember, you only get one shot at this for each tax period. Make sure you qualify before you call. So if you're not sure whether you qualify for first-time abatement or if you need help with a more complex penalty situation, reach out to Boss Tax Law. We help clients remove penalties all the time and would be happy to schedule a consultation with you to review your situation and see how we can help. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.